Ah, look who's standing, exactly where they said they'd be. You absolute architects of your own empire, welcome back. Or maybe I should say, welcome to the timeline you called shot by shot while they laughed, doubted, and placed bets on your downfall. Because if you're still here, still watching, still breathing, you're not the person they left behind. You're the prophecy they thought was delusion. You're the future they swore would never come. You're the nightmare dressed in everything they said you'd never achieve. And oh, the way their eyes burn now. The way their throats close when your name comes up. The way they refresh your page, check your status, measure their mediocrity against your rise. Let me ask you something. How does it feel to be a fortune teller? How does it feel to have called every single card before it fell? Because you did, didn't you? You said you'd walk away, and you walked. You said you'd heal, and you healed. You said you'd build something they couldn't touch, and now they're standing outside the gates, squinting through the bars, trying to figure out how you turned pain into power, silence into strength, and abandonment into absolute victory. They thought you were talking big. They thought you were coping. They thought those late-night declarations, those tear-soaked promises to yourself, those whispered "watch me" moments were just emotional theatrics. But you weren't performing. You were programming reality. And reality, my beautiful, stubborn, unbreakable creatures, just hit execute. Here's what they didn't understand about you. When you said you'd choose yourself, they heard surrender. When you said you'd let them go, they heard defeat. When you said you'd focus on your own path, they heard retreat. But you were writing the script to a movie they'd pay to watch later. You were coding the algorithm that would put you on every screen they can't escape. You were planting seeds in soil they didn't even know existed, and now the harvest is choking their airways. Because choosing yourself wasn't the end of your story. It was the prologue to their torment. Every prediction you made, every goal you set, every version of yourself you described when you were at your lowest, it's all here now. It's all real. It's all undeniable. And they have to live in a world where you were right, and they were spectacularly, publicly, painfully wrong. They're watching you now with the kind of attention they should have given you when you needed it. They're analyzing your moves with the kind of focus they should have used to understand you when you were still accessible. They're memorizing your patterns with the kind of obsession they should have invested in keeping you. But you don't need their attention now. You don't want their focus now. You don't value their obsession now. Because the you that craved their validation, dead. The you that needed their approval, buried. The you that would have settled for their leftovers, extinct. And in its place stands the architect, the one who saw the blueprint when everyone else saw ruins, the one who believed the vision when everyone else saw delusion, the one who bet on themselves when the entire room was betting against them. Let's go back to that moment, shall we? That moment when you finally chose you. That moment when you looked at everything, everyone, that was draining you, dimming you, doubting you, and you said the word that changed everything. No, not a loud no, not a dramatic no, not a no that came with explanations or justifications or apologies. Just no, simple, final, terrifying in its certainty. And they didn't take you seriously, did they? They thought you'd come back. They thought you'd crack. They thought the loneliness would break you. The silence would scare you. The journey would humble you back into their arms, their spaces, their little boxes of control. But you didn't come back. You didn't crack. You didn't beg. You didn't break. You got quiet. And in that quiet, you got dangerous. You stopped arguing and started building. You stopped explaining and started executing. You stopped trying to prove your worth to people who were committed to undervaluing you, and you started investing every ounce of that energy into the only person who was going to give you a return, yourself. And oh, they watched. From a distance, they tried to pretend was indifference. They watched. Through mutual friends, through social media, through that sick psychological need to know if you were suffering without them. They watched, and at first, they smiled. At first, they felt validated. At first, your silence looked like exactly what they wanted it to look like. Defeat. But then something shifted. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into that agonizing stretch where they realized you weren't coming back. You weren't falling apart. You weren't giving them the satisfaction of a breakdown they could screenshot and share. You were gone. Actually gone. Not geographically, not physically, but energetically, emotionally, spiritually. You had exited their dimension entirely. And that's when the first prediction started manifesting. You said you'd be fine without them. They said you'd regret it. The scoreboard? You, thriving. Them, stalking your page at 2 a.m. wondering what changed. You said you'd find peace. They said you'd find loneliness. The scoreboard? You, sleeping through the night for the first time in years. Them, lying awake wondering why they can't stop thinking about you. You said you'd build something beautiful. They said you'd fail without their support. The scoreboard? You, creating empires. Them, still gossiping about you because their own lives provide nothing worth discussing. Every single thing you said would happen when you chose yourself has happened. Not because you're magic, not because you're special, but because you understood something they never could. The person who bets on themselves never loses. The house always wins when you are the house. And now they're trapped, aren't they? Trapped in a prison of their own making. A prison where every bar is a memory of how they treated you. Every wall is a reminder of what they lost. Every corner echoes with the things they said that aged like milk in the sun. They're watching you, and it's killing them. Not because they miss you, though some of them do. Not because they want you back, though some of them desperately wish they could undo their arrogance. But because watching you succeed, watching you glow, watching you become everything you said you would, forces them to confront a truth they've been running from their entire lives. They were the problem, not you. You weren't difficult. They were incapable. You weren't too much. They were insufficient. You weren't broken. They just didn't have the tools to appreciate wholeness. And that realization, that soul-crushing, ego-destroying realization, is something they have to carry every single time they see you winning. Every promotion you get is a reminder they underestimated you. Every boundary you set is a reminder they overstepped. Every smile on your face is a reminder that you found happiness without them, and that happiness is real, sustainable, untouchable. They thought they were irreplaceable in your life. They thought their absence would create a void that would consume you. They thought you'd spend years trying to fill the space they left. But you didn't fill it. You renovated it. You turned that empty space into a sanctuary. You turned that void into a foundation. You turned their absence into the best thing that ever happened to you. And they know it. They can feel it. They can see it in every post, every picture, every update that shows a version of you they never got to experience because they were too busy trying to control, critique, or contain you. The irony is suffocating, isn't it? They had access to you when you were still figuring yourself out, still breaking patterns, still learning boundaries. They had front row seats to your transformation. They could have been part of your rise. They could have celebrated your growth. They could have supported your vision. But they chose mockery. They chose doubt. They chose to be obstacles instead of allies. And now? Now they're in the nosebleed section, watching through binoculars, paying full price for a show they could have experienced for free if they'd just believed in you when belief cost them nothing. You told them this would happen. You told them you'd be fine. You told them you'd be better. You told them you'd be everything they said you couldn't be. And they laughed. They dismissed. They rolled their eyes and made jokes and placed bets with their friends about how long until you came crawling back. But the punchline is on them now. The joke is their life. The bet they lost is their peace of mind. Because you didn't crawl back. You didn't stumble. You didn't fall. You flew. And now they're stuck on the ground, necks craned, watching you soar, wondering how someone they discarded became someone they can't stop thinking about. Let's talk about what you did while they were busy underestimating you. Let's talk about the work they didn't see, the sacrifices they'll never understand, the discipline they couldn't fathom. Because your rise wasn't luck, it wasn't timing, it wasn't some cosmic accident that fell in your lap while you were sitting around hoping things would change. No, you engineered this. You architected this. You bled for this in ways they'll never comprehend because they've never had to fight for their own respect. While they were sleeping, you were strategizing. While they were scrolling, you were studying. While they were complaining about their circumstances, you were creating new ones. You took every ounce of pain they caused you and converted it into fuel. You took every moment of loneliness and turned it into focus. You took every second of silence and transformed it into clarity. You didn't waste your healing. You didn't squander your solitude. You didn't treat your alone time like punishment. You treated it like preparation. Preparation for the life you described when you were at your lowest. Preparation for the person you promised yourself you'd become. Preparation for this exact moment when everyone who doubted you would have no choice but to watch you prove them wrong without saying a single word. And the discipline required for that? The consistency demanded by that? The unwavering belief needed for that? They don't have it. They never will. Because discipline is born from desire, and they were never hungry enough. They were comfortable in mediocrity. They were content in chaos. They were satisfied with surface-level existence. But you tasted something different. You felt the weight of your own potential. You saw glimpses of who you could become if you just removed everyone and everything standing in your way. And instead of being scared of that vision, instead of shrinking from that responsibility, instead of making excuses about why now wasn't the right time, you chose it. You chose the hard road. You chose the lonely road. You chose the road everyone said was impossible. And every single day, even when you wanted to quit, even when you questioned if you made the right choice, even when their voices echoed in your head telling you that you'd fail, you kept walking. You kept building. You kept believing, not in some abstract concept of the universe has a plan, but in yourself, in your ability to learn, in your capacity to adapt, in your refusal to accept a life smaller than the one you envisioned. And prediction by prediction, brick by brick, day by day, you built the empire they said would never stand. You created the life they said you didn't deserve. You became the person they insisted you could never be. And the most beautiful part? You did it quietly. You did it without announcements. You did it without needing their validation or their applause or their permission. You did it because you knew something they'll spend their entire lives trying to understand. Your worth was never up for debate. Your value was never determined by their opinion. Your future was never dependent on their belief. You were always going to make it. The only question was whether you'd do it with them or without them. And thank the stars, thank fate, thank whatever force intervened, you chose without. Because with them, you'd be a diluted version of this, a compromised version of this, a smaller, quieter, dimmer version of this. But without them, you're nuclear, you're undiluted. You're the full, uncut, unfiltered version of everything you were always meant to be. And here's the twist they never saw coming. Here's the plot development that's eating them alive. You don't need their validation anymore. You don't want their apology. You don't crave their acknowledgement. There was a time when you would have given anything to hear them say, "I was wrong about you. I'm sorry." You were right. There was a version of you that fantasized about the moment they'd finally see your worth and come back, humbled, apologetic, begging for another chance. But that version of you died in the fire you used to forge this new one. And this version? This version looks at their potential apology and feels nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction. Not even the bittersweet ache of closure. Just nothing. Because you've transcended the need for their acknowledgement. You've evolved past the point where their opinion carries weight. You've ascended to a level where their validation is irrelevant. Their regret is meaningless. Their realization came too late to matter. And that indifference is the most devastating thing you could give them. Because they can handle your anger. They can handle your pain. They can even handle your success if they think you still care what they think about it. But your indifference? Your genuine, authentic, bone-deep disinterest in their thoughts, feelings, or regrets? That breaks them. That haunts them. That keeps them up at night wondering how they went from being the center of your world to not even being a blip on your radar. You chose yourself, and in doing so you chose a life where their presence became optional, then unnecessary, then completely irrelevant. They're watching you now, trying to find some crack, some weakness, some sign that you still think about them, still hurt from what they did, still carry the weight of their betrayal. But there's nothing there. Not because you're pretending, not because you're performing strength, but because you genuinely moved on, you genuinely healed. You genuinely built a life so full, so rich, so aligned with who you actually are, that there's no room for them in it anymore. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of simple, undeniable truth. They don't fit in this version of your life. They don't match this frequency. They don't belong in this chapter. And every single day that you continue to rise, to grow, to glow without them, that truth becomes more obvious, more painful, more impossible for them to ignore. They're watching your predictions come true, and they're realizing they were never part of the vision. They were the obstacle you had to overcome to reach it. They were the weight you had to drop to fly. They were the lesson you had to learn to level up. And now they're stuck in the past, replaying conversations, rewriting history in their heads, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. While you're in the future, creating realities they can't even imagine, living a life they'll never touch, becoming a legend in real time. Let's put this in terms even they can understand. Let's make it statistical. Let's make it measurable. Let's make it so undeniable that even their most loyal defenders, even their most committed enablers, even the people still holding on to the narrative that you were the problem, have to admit defeat. Prediction 1. You said you'd be happier without them. Current status? Your mental health is the best it's ever been. Your energy is protected. Your peace is non-negotiable. Your joy is authentic. Your smile reaches your eyes now. The weight you carried when they were around, that invisible burden that made everything harder, heavier, more exhausting, it's gone. You sleep better. You breathe easier. You exist without that constant low-level anxiety that comes from being around people who don't truly value you. They said you'd regret leaving. The data says otherwise. Prediction 2. You said you'd accomplish more on your own. Current status? Every goal you set when you chose yourself has either been achieved or is actively in progress. The projects they said would fail are thriving. The dreams they called unrealistic are manifesting. The timeline they said was impossible is ahead of schedule. You're not just surviving without them. You're excelling. You're innovating. You're creating at a level you never could when their doubt was background noise in every decision you made. They said you needed them. The results prove you needed their absence. Prediction 3. You said you'd attract better. Current status? The people in your life now, the relationships you've built, the connections you've made, they're on a completely different level. They support you. They celebrate you. They challenge you in ways that make you grow, not in ways that make you shrink. They see your vision and help you build it instead of questioning why you have it. They respect your boundaries instead of testing them. They add to your life instead of draining from it. The upgrade is so obvious, so dramatic, so undeniable that even they can see it, and it kills them. Because they had a chance to be in this circle, and they fumbled it. They had an opportunity to be part of this era, and they wasted it. Prediction 4. You said you'd stop dimming your light for anyone. Current status? You're blinding. You're unapologetic. You're fully expressed. You're taking up space without shrinking. You're speaking your truth without filtering. You're pursuing your goals without downplaying them to make others comfortable. The version of you that would minimize achievements to avoid triggering their insecurity? Gone. The version of you that would hide your wins to keep the peace? Extinct. The version of you that would play small to make them feel big? Buried. You're operating at full capacity now, full volume, full brightness, full power. And anyone who can't handle that, anyone who's threatened by that, anyone who needs you to dim to feel secure, they don't get access anymore. They don't get proximity. They don't get to benefit from your light while complaining it's too bright. They're out, permanently. And the people who can handle your shine, who celebrate it, who bask in it, and shine brighter themselves because of it, they're in, they're close, they're protected. They're part of the future you're building. The scoreboard is clear. Every prediction you made when you chose yourself has come true or is actively manifesting. Every doubt they expressed has been disproven. Every limitation they tried to place on you has been shattered. Every ceiling they said you'd hit has been broken through, and they have to live with that. They have to wake up every day knowing they were wrong, you were right, and there's nothing they can do to change that narrative now. It's written, it's documented, it's undeniable. You called it, you executed it, you proved it, and they're forever the people who didn't believe in the person everyone else now sees as inevitable. But let's not just focus on where you are. Let's talk about where you're going. Because this is just the beginning. This is the foundation. This is the prologue to a story they'll tell about you for years. You chose yourself once, and it changed everything. But the beautiful, terrifying, absolutely unstoppable truth is that you're going to keep choosing yourself. Every day, every decision, every opportunity, every moment where you could slip back into old patterns, old people, old versions of yourself that were more convenient for others but devastating for you, you're going to choose you. And that consistency, that unwavering commitment to your own growth, your own goals, your own peace, it's going to compound, it's going to multiply. It's going to create results that make your current success look like the warm-up. You're building momentum they can't stop. You're creating opportunities they can't access. You're developing skills they can't replicate. You're cultivating a mindset they can't comprehend. And with every passing day, the gap between where you are and where they are widens. Not because you're trying to beat them, not because you're competing with them, but because you're on a completely different path, playing a completely different game, operating in a completely different dimension. They're still fighting yesterday's battles. You're building tomorrow's empire. They're still trying to prove they were right about you. You're too busy being right about yourself to care what they thought. They're still stuck in the story of what happened. You're writing new chapters they'll never be part of. Oh, look at that. Look at you, standing there, breathing easier, sleeping deeper, smiling without asking for permission first. You detached. You actually did it. You walked away from the circus, left the stage, stopped performing for an audience that never deserved a single encore. And now they're scrambling, panicking, reaching, clawing, attaching harder than they ever did when you were right there, bleeding yourself dry just to keep them interested. Isn't that something? The moment you stopped chasing, they started sprinting. The second you stopped explaining yourself, they demanded essays. The instant you found peace without them, they lost theirs completely. Welcome back to reality. Or should I say, welcome to the aftermath. Because what you're witnessing right now isn't love. It isn't regret. It isn't even respect. It's desperation. And desperation, my friend, looks absolutely hideous on them. Let's be ruthlessly honest here. For months, maybe years, you gave them everything. Your time, your energy, your attention, your forgiveness, your chances. You showed up when they disappeared. You texted back when they went silent. You made excuses for their behavior while they made you the villain in stories you weren't even part of. You bent, twisted, shrunk yourself into shapes that didn't fit, all because some twisted part of you believed that if you just loved them harder, tried more, stayed longer, they'd finally see your worth. But they didn't, did they? They saw you as available, as predictable, as someone they could access whenever they felt like it, without any real investment, without any genuine effort. They took your presence for granted because they never thought you'd actually leave. They thought you'd always be there, waiting in the wings, ready to jump back into their chaos the moment they snapped their fingers. But then, you did something they never saw coming. You detached, not with a dramatic exit, not with a farewell speech, not with threats or ultimatums. You just left. Quietly. Completely. You stopped responding to the breadcrumbs. You stopped showing up to the games. You stopped watering dead plants and expecting them to bloom. You withdrew your energy, your presence, your attention, and you redirected it all toward yourself, toward your healing, toward your peace. And that silence, that absence, that detachment, it did something to them that no amount of your words ever could. It woke them up. Not to your value, not yet, but to the fact that they no longer had control. And people who thrive on control absolutely lose their minds when they realize the game is over and they didn't even get a say in it. So now, here they come, suddenly interested, suddenly checking in, suddenly remembering you exist after weeks, months of radio silence. They're liking old posts, watching your stories within seconds of you posting, finding excuses to be in your orbit again. They're asking mutual friends about you, dropping your name in conversations, acting like they're concerned, like they miss you, like they've had some grand revelation about how special you are. But here's the truth they'll never admit out loud. They don't miss you. They miss the supply. They miss the attention you gave them. They miss having someone they could rely on to always be there, to always forgive, to always come back no matter how many times they disrespected your boundaries, dismissed your feelings, or made you feel small. What they're experiencing right now isn't love, it's withdrawal. And withdrawal makes people do desperate, ugly things. You ever notice how they didn't care about your silence until it became permanent? How they didn't miss your presence until it was completely gone? That's not coincidence. That's strategy failure. See, they operated under the assumption that you'd always crack first, that you'd always be the one to reach out, to apologize, to try again. They gambled on your goodness, on your loyalty, on your hope that things could change. And for a long time they were right. You did come back. You did try again. You did forgive things that should have been deal breakers. But this time you didn't. This time you meant it when you walked away. And that shift, that finality, it triggered something primal in them. Panic. Panic doesn't look like love, though they'll try to dress it up that way. Panic looks like sudden affection after months of coldness. Panic looks like love bombing after weeks of neglect. Panic looks like promises they've broken 100 times before, delivered with a sincerity that almost feels real. They'll text you at 2 a.m. with, "I've been thinking about you," as if that erases the 2 a.m.s you spent crying over them while they were perfectly fine without you. They'll post cryptic quotes about losing someone who mattered, about regretting taking people for granted, about realizing too late what they had. And you'll see it. And a part of you, that part that still remembers loving them, might feel something. But don't confuse that feeling with an invitation to return. Because here's what's really happening. They're not missing the real you. They're missing the version of you that made them feel powerful. The version that chased, that waited, that hoped, that stayed despite every red flag. They're missing the dynamic where they held all the cards, where your happiness depended on their mood, where they could come and go as they pleased without consequence. Your detachment didn't just remove you from their life. It removed their sense of control. It removed their safety net. It removed the guarantee that no matter how badly they treated you, you'd still be there. And that terrifies them, not because they love you, but because they lost their favorite game piece. Watch how they operate now. Watch how they try to slip back in through side doors, through casual mentions, through "I was just thinking about you," messages that seem innocent but are carefully calculated. They're testing the waters, seeing if you've softened, seeing if enough time has passed for you to forget why you left in the first place. They're hoping you've missed them enough to overlook the patterns, to ignore the history, to give them another chance they haven't earned and won't appreciate. But you already know this dance, don't you? You've been here before. You've seen this episode. You know how it ends. The difference is, this time, you're not auditioning for a role in their chaos. This time, you're the one watching from a distance, unattached, unmoved, unbothered. And that unbothered energy? That's what's driving them insane. Because they can handle your anger. They can handle your sadness. They can even handle your disappointment. What they cannot handle is your indifference, your peace, your complete lack of reaction to their existence. That's the ultimate rejection. That's the ultimate power shift. You're not fighting for them anymore. You're not fighting with them anymore. You're not fighting at all. You've simply moved on. And that reality, that undeniable, irreversible reality, is eating them alive from the inside out. Now comes the performance, the grand show, the carefully scripted act where they pretend they've changed, grown, evolved into someone worthy of your time. They'll tell you they've been going to therapy, reading self-help books, working on themselves. They'll admit to their mistakes with a level of self-awareness that seems impressive until you realize it's just another manipulation tactic. They've learned that simply denying their behavior doesn't work anymore. So now they acknowledge it. They own it. They apologize for it. But they do it all in a way that's designed to pull you back in, not to genuinely make amends. Listen carefully to the language they use. I know I messed up. I realize now what I lost. I was immature back then. Notice how it's always past tense? Notice how they frame their toxic behavior as something they've already moved beyond, as if personal growth happens overnight, as if patterns built over years can be dismantled in weeks. They're selling you a story of transformation, but they're skipping the actual work. Real change is slow, uncomfortable, and doesn't require an audience. Real change happens in private, through consistent action over time, not through dramatic confessions designed to get an emotional response. And here's where it gets manipulative. They'll use your own empathy against you. They know you're the type of person who believes in second chances, who wants to see the good in people, who hopes that love can inspire someone to become better. They know you have a soft heart beneath that armor you've built. So they'll appeal to that softness. They'll cry. They'll be vulnerable. They'll share just enough pain to make you feel sorry for them, to make you feel like maybe they really are suffering, maybe they really do regret losing you, maybe you should give them one more chance. But ask yourself this: where was this vulnerability when you needed it? Where was this emotional honesty when you were begging for basic communication? Where was this effort when you were still there, still trying, still hoping? The truth is, they didn't change. They adapted. They learned what didn't work last time, and they're trying a new approach. It's still manipulation, just with a more sophisticated script. They're not becoming a better person. They're becoming a better actor. And the moment you let them back in, the moment they feel secure in your presence again, the mask will slip, the patterns will resurface, the disrespect will return. Because people don't fundamentally change their character just because they lost access to someone. They change when they genuinely want to be better, when they're willing to do the uncomfortable work with no guarantee of reward, when their transformation is about them, not about winning you back. You know what real change looks like? Real change respects your decision to leave. Real change doesn't pressure you to return. Real change says, I understand why you walked away, and I respect your boundary even though it hurts. Real change focuses on becoming better for themselves and future relationships, not on convincing you to give them another shot at breaking your heart. If they were truly different, they wouldn't be desperately trying to prove it to you. They'd be quietly living it. They'd be demonstrating growth through their actions with other people, through their choices, through their life, without needing you to witness or validate it. The fact that they're performing this change specifically for your eyes tells you everything you need to know about how genuine it actually is. Here's what they didn't understand until now. Your presence was the light in their life, and your absence is the darkness they can't escape. While you were there, they took you for granted because light is easy to ignore when you're standing in it. But now that you're gone, now that they're sitting in the shadow of your absence, they're finally realizing what they lost. Not your love, not your loyalty, not your kindness, though those were all valuable. What they lost was the way you made them feel about themselves. You made them feel wanted, needed, important. You gave them purpose, validation, attention. You were the mirror that reflected back a version of themselves they actually liked. And now that mirror is gone. Now they're left with just themselves, and they don't like what they see. They're forced to confront their own emptiness, their own patterns, their own inability to maintain genuine connection. They're realizing that the chaos they created, the games they played, the distance they maintained, it didn't protect them. It isolated them. And isolation feels very different when it's no longer a choice but a consequence. They're experiencing the exact loneliness they put you through, except you survived yours and came out stronger. They're not sure they can do the same. Your absence is teaching them lessons your presence never could. When you were there, explaining yourself, defending yourself, trying to make them understand, your words fell on deaf ears because they didn't have to truly listen. They knew you'd still be there tomorrow. But now that you're silent, now that you're gone, suddenly they're hearing everything you said. Suddenly those conversations they dismissed are replaying in their mind. Suddenly they're understanding the pain they caused. Not because they've grown more empathetic, but because they're finally experiencing a fraction of what you felt. Your absence is the teacher they needed all along, the one voice they couldn't ignore, the one lesson they couldn't skip. And it's driving them crazy, isn't it? You can see it in the way they act. The sudden interest in your life, the obsessive checking of your social media, the questions they ask mutual friends, the random places they show up, hoping to run into you. They're desperate for any sign that you're struggling without them, that you miss them, that you're waiting for them to come back. But what they're finding instead is even more terrifying. You're thriving, you're glowing, you're at peace, you're living your life fully without them in it. And that reality is shattering the narrative they told themselves about how important they were to you. See, they convinced themselves that if they ever wanted you back, you'd come running. They believed that your love for them was so deep, so unconditional, so desperate that you'd always be available, always be waiting. But you proved them wrong. You proved that your love had limits, that your patience had boundaries, that your presence was a privilege they lost when they chose to abuse it. And now they're scrambling, attaching harder, desperately trying to get back something they never appreciated when they had it. But here's the beautiful, poetic justice of it all. The harder they chase, the further you drift. The more they reach, the less you care. The louder they get, the quieter your response. Because you've already moved on, and no amount of their desperation can pull you backward. Desperation has a sound, and once you know it, you can hear it from miles away. It's in the forced casualness of their messages. It's in the overly enthusiastic responses to things you post. It's in the way they try to remind you of good times, of inside jokes, of memories you shared, as if nostalgia is strong enough to override reality. They're not being genuine, they're being strategic. Every reach out is calculated. Every message is crafted to trigger an emotional response. Every reminder of the past is designed to make you forget why you left in the future. But you're not falling for it anymore, are you? You've seen this movie before. You know the ending. You recognize the pattern. They're not reaching out because they suddenly value you. They're reaching out because they need something from you. Validation, attention, forgiveness, access. And the moment they get it, the moment you respond with warmth, with openness, with that familiar energy they remember, they'll relax. They'll settle back into their old patterns. They'll start taking you for granted again, because that's who they are. Desperation doesn't change people. It just reveals what they're willing to do when they're no longer in control. And you can see it in their behavior, can't you? The inconsistency, the hot and cold. One day they're pouring their heart out. The next they're distant again, testing to see if you'll chase. They're operating from a place of scarcity, convinced that if they can just get your attention, just get you to respond, just get you to engage, they can slowly pull you back into the dynamic they controlled. But they're failing to realize something crucial. You're not operating from scarcity anymore. You're operating from abundance. You've discovered that life without them isn't the nightmare they predicted. It's actually better, calmer, healthier, more authentic. Watch how desperate they become when they realize their usual tactics aren't working. Watch how the messages increase in frequency, in intensity, in emotional manipulation. They'll start with casual, then move to concerned, then shift to vulnerable, then escalate to guilt-tripping, then maybe even swing to anger when none of it penetrates your peace. I thought you cared about me. I guess you never really loved me. You've changed. You're cold now. They'll try to make you feel bad for protecting yourself, for maintaining boundaries, for refusing to re-enter a situation that drained you. They'll frame your healing as heartlessness, your growth as betrayal, your peace as punishment against them. But here's what they don't understand. You're not being cold, you're being smart. You're not being heartless, you're being self-protective. You're not punishing them. You're prioritizing yourself. And that's the difference between who you were and who you are now. The old you would have felt guilty, would have questioned yourself, would have wondered if maybe you were being too harsh, too unforgiving, too rigid. The new you knows better. The new you recognizes manipulation when you see it. The new you understands that people who genuinely care about you don't make you feel bad for having boundaries. They respect them. And anyone trying to guilt you back into their life doesn't deserve access to it in the first place. There's a certain power in not caring anymore. Not in a bitter, resentful way, but in a genuine, peaceful way. You're not thinking about them constantly anymore. You're not analyzing their behavior, decoding their messages, wondering what they really meant. You're not losing sleep over them, not crying over them, not hoping they'll change. You've reached that sacred space of true indifference, where they're just another person who used to be in your life but isn't anymore. And that indifference, that emotional detachment, it's the ultimate form of freedom. They can feel it too. They can sense that shift in your energy. When they reach out now, they're not getting the warm, eager responses they used to. They're getting short replies, delayed responses, or sometimes no response at all. And it's killing them because they can't manipulate someone who doesn't care. They can't guilt someone who's emotionally detached. They can't control someone who's already free. Your indifference is the wall they keep hitting, and no amount of their effort can break through it because you built it with lessons they taught you. And here's the irony. They wanted you to stop being so emotional, to stop overreacting, to stop making everything a big deal. Well, congratulations to them. You did exactly that. You stopped feeling intensely about them. You stopped reacting to their behavior. You stopped making their actions a big deal in your life. But now that you've actually done it, now that you've become the calm, unbothered person they claimed they wanted, they hate it, because what they really wanted wasn't for you to care less. It was for you to care differently, to care on their terms, when it was convenient for them, without holding them accountable. But you're done playing that game. You're done shrinking yourself to make them comfortable. You're done explaining your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. You're done giving energy to people who wouldn't give you peace. You've learned that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And you've mastered that indifference not through bitterness, but through healing. Through choosing yourself repeatedly until it became natural. Through protecting your peace until it became sacred. Through walking away until staying away became easier than any version of going back. This indifference you feel, this emotional freedom, it's not something they can ruin anymore. They can try to provoke you, to trigger you, to pull you back into emotional chaos, but it won't work. You're operating on a different frequency now. You're at peace in a way that their presence never allowed. And that peace is so much more valuable than any relationship with someone who consistently disrupted it. You've tasted freedom, and there's no going back to captivity. You've experienced calm, and there's no returning to their storm. You've found yourself, and there's no losing yourself in them ever again. Indifference, where they're just another person who used to be in your life but isn't anymore. And that indifference, that emotional detachment, it's the ultimate form of freedom. They can feel it too. They can sense that shift in your energy. When they reach out now, they're not getting the warm, eager responses they used to. They're getting short replies, delayed responses, or sometimes no response at all. And it's killing them because they can't manipulate someone who doesn't care. They can't guilt someone who's emotionally detached. They can't control someone who's already free. Your indifference is the wall they keep hitting, and no amount of their effort can break through it because you built it with lessons they taught you. And here's the irony. They wanted you to stop being so emotional, to stop overreacting, to stop making everything a big deal. Well, congratulations to them. You did exactly that. You stopped feeling intensely about them. You stopped reacting to their behavior. You stopped making their actions a big deal in your life. But now that you've actually done it, now that you've become the calm, unbothered person they claimed they wanted, they hate it. Because what they really wanted wasn't for you to care less. It was for you to care differently. To care on their terms, when it was convenient for them, without holding them accountable. But you're done playing that game. You're done shrinking yourself to make them comfortable. You're done explaining your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. You're done giving energy to people who wouldn't give you peace. You've learned that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And you've mastered that indifference not through bitterness, but through healing. Through choosing yourself repeatedly until it became natural. Through protecting your peace until it became sacred. Through walking away until staying away became easier than any version of going back. This indifference you feel, this emotional freedom, it's not something they can ruin anymore. They can try to provoke you, to trigger you, to pull you back into emotional chaos, but it won't work. You're operating on a different frequency now. You're at peace in a way that their presence never allowed. And that peace is so much more valuable than any relationship with someone who consistently disrupted it. You've tasted freedom, and there's no going back to captivity. You've experienced calm, and there's no returning to their storm. You've found yourself, and there's no losing